Few serial killers have captivated and terrified the public like the Zodiac Killer. Operating in Northern California in the late 1960s and early 1970s, the Zodiac claimed responsibility for at least 5 murders, but hinted his body count was higher. What set him apart wasn't just his brutality, but his need for recognition, sending cryptic letters filled with threats and coded messages, daring law enforcement to catch him. Despite decades of investigation, the Zodiac's identity remains a chilling mystery. But how did it all begin, and why has he never been caught? The Zodiac Killer's first confirmed attack occurred on December 20, 1968, in Vallejo, California. High school students Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday were on their first date, parked on a secluded lover's lane when an unknown assailant approached their car. Without warning, the killer fired multiple shots, executing both teenagers. The crime was seemingly random, with no robbery or sexual assault involved, leaving the authorities completely baffled. What made the crime even more chilling was the fact that it didn't seem to fit the profile of a typical serial killer. No immediate motive could be discerned, which made this case all the more perplexing. Law enforcement at the time struggled to understand what kind of killer they were dealing with. Someone who could commit such a violent and cold-blooded act with no apparent reason. It wasn't until months later that the Zodiac would begin to reveal his true nature and intentions. But for now, the case was just another unsolved murder. 6 months later, on July 4, 1969, another couple, Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau, were attacked in a parked car in the same area. This time, the killer approached them with a flashlight, fired several rounds, and walked away. In a chilling turn of events, Michael survived and provided police with a description. A man in his late 20s to early 30s, stocky, with short, light-colored hair. The police now had a potential lead, but little did they know, the Zodiac was not finished yet. In fact, this was just the beginning of his reign of terror. What followed was something no one could have anticipated. Shortly after the attack, the killer called the police from a nearby payphone, claiming responsibility for both this crime and the previous double murder. He spoke with a calm confidence, as if he had been expecting the authorities to find him. But what really stood out was his need for recognition. He didn't just want to kill, he wanted the world to know about it. A month later, newspapers in the Bay Area received 3 identical letters, written in a disturbing, almost childlike style. Each letter contained 1/3 of a 408-symbol cryptogram, which the Zodiac claimed would reveal his identity if solved. The letters were unsettling, and their taunting tone sent a clear message to the public and the police. The Zodiac was playing a game, and he was in control. One of the letters read, "I like killing people because it is so much fun." It was a taunt, a way for the killer to insert himself into the public eye. Days later, a couple from Salinas cracked the cipher, but instead of revealing his name, the decoded message only confirmed his sadistic love for murder. It was a strange and sickening way for the Zodiac to introduce himself to the world. The killer had just begun, and he was eager to prove that he was not just another murderer. He was something far worse, someone who could manipulate the public and the police alike. As the Zodiac's letters continued to arrive, the fear and confusion only grew. But there was more to come. His taunts would only escalate, and his need for attention would lead to even more gruesome acts. On September 27, 1969, the Zodiac struck again, this time in Lake Berryessa. Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were having a peaceful afternoon by the lake when a man in a bizarre executioner-style hood approached them. He wore a black outfit, with a white crosshair symbol on his chest, the now iconic Zodiac insignia. Holding them at gunpoint, he claimed to be an escaped convict needing money and a car. He then tied them up and stabbed them repeatedly before walking away. The attack was brutal, and it seemed to serve no other purpose than to inflict terror. Cecilia later died from her wounds, but Brian miraculously survived. Before leaving, the killer wrote a message on their car door, detailing the crime and signing it with his Zodiac symbol. This act was a clear message to the public. He wanted them to know exactly who was responsible for the violence. Brian was able to provide a detailed description of the killer, which was a breakthrough for investigators. The Zodiac had made a mistake by leaving a survivor. But this victory was short-lived. The killer's next move would demonstrate just how elusive he was. Just 2 weeks later, on October 11, 1969, the Zodiac killed again in San Francisco. This time, his victim was a taxi driver, Paul Stine. Unlike his previous killings in secluded areas, this murder occurred in a crowded neighborhood. Shockingly, witnesses saw the suspect wiping down the car and casually walking away. A police patrol car even briefly encountered him, but due to a dispatcher's mistake, they believed they were looking for a black suspect, allowing the real Zodiac to slip away undetected. The Zodiac's audacity was unmatched. He had committed murder in broad daylight, and even with witnesses, he managed to escape without leaving any concrete evidence. But that wasn't enough for him. The Zodiac sent a piece of Paul Stine's bloody shirt to a newspaper, proving he was the killer. He mocked the police, calling them incompetent and daring them to catch him. His desire for recognition had escalated to new heights, and he continued sending letters, claiming responsibility for 37 murders, though only 5 were officially confirmed. By now, the Zodiac had become a figure of legend. He wasn't just a killer, he was a symbol of fear, chaos, and mystery. His letters, his cryptic messages, and his seeming invincibility made him an enigma that investigators were struggling to understand. He was taunting the police, daring them to catch him, all while continuing his killing spree. The question on everyone's mind was, what would he do next? The Zodiac case quickly became a nightmare for investigators, who faced numerous false leads, confusing clues, and cryptic messages that seemed to mock their every effort. The killer's obsession with sending letters and codes became one of the most perplexing aspects of the case. Despite the passage of time, investigators struggled to decipher the Zodiac's messages, and this only intensified the public's fascination with the case. Several men were investigated as possible suspects, but no one was ever definitively linked to the crimes. One of the strongest suspects was Arthur Lee Allen, a convicted child molester who lived near the murder sites. He had disturbing tendencies, including a fascination with the Zodiac case, and he owned Zodiac-like boots. Additionally, Allen had made suspicious statements about the crimes and seemed to enjoy the attention. However, despite the circumstantial evidence, DNA tests later ruled him out as the killer. Other suspects included Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, convicted serial killer Edward Edwards, and even an alleged connection to Charles Manson's cult, though none could be definitively linked to the case. Each theory seemed to raise more questions than answers, leaving investigators and the public in a constant state of uncertainty. Was the Zodiac a solitary killer, or was he part of something bigger? Could any of these suspects actually be the notorious killer, or was the Zodiac still out there, laughing at the investigators' efforts? But perhaps the most intriguing part of the Zodiac mystery was his unsolved ciphers. Over the years, the Zodiac sent 4 major cryptograms, each one more complex than the last. The first cipher was cracked, but the infamous 340-character cipher remained unsolved for decades. It taunted both law enforcement and cryptographers alike, becoming a symbol of the Zodiac's cleverness and elusiveness. In 2020, a team of cryptologists finally deciphered the 340-character cipher, but unfortunately, it still didn't reveal the Zodiac's true identity. Instead, the decoded message was filled with more taunts and cryptic statements, further adding to the killer's mystique. Despite the passage of time and the many attempts to solve the case, the Zodiac's identity remained one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in true crime history. The cryptograms, the letters, and the strange symbols were all part of the killer's twisted game, and it was clear that he enjoyed the confusion he caused. Even after all these years, the Zodiac's legacy continued to haunt investigators and true crime enthusiasts. The question still remained: who was the Zodiac Killer? Despite decades of investigation, the Zodiac was never caught. His letters abruptly stopped in the early 1970s, and many believe he either died or simply faded into obscurity. Others speculated that he had been arrested for a different crime, or that he had moved on to other places, leaving behind his killing spree. But the fact that he was never brought to justice left a lasting impression on everyone who followed the case. The Zodiac's disappearance was just as mysterious as his killings. Some experts believed he may have stopped killing after his last confirmed murder, while others theorized that he simply went underground, knowing that his actions were attracting too much attention. Theories about his possible motivations began to surface. Was he a psychopath with a deep need for recognition, or was there something else driving his desire to kill? the lack of answers only fueled the fascination with his case. However, in recent years, forensic genealogy, the same technique that led to the capture of the Golden State Killer, has renewed hope in solving the case. In 2021, a group of former law enforcement officers and private investigators claimed they had identified the Zodiac as Gary Francis Post, a deceased Air Force veteran. The evidence was compelling. Post had lived in areas near where the murders occurred, and his physical description seemed to match that of the Zodiac. But despite these claims, no official confirmation has been made, and the Zodiac's true identity remains unknown. The lack of closure has haunted the families of the victims and the investigators who spent years trying to crack the case. The Zodiac's legacy continues to lurk in the shadows of American criminal history, and his crimes remain a stark reminder of the dangers of anonymity and the complexities of criminal psychology. The case also raised important questions about the nature of evil and the ways in which serial killers can manipulate the public and law enforcement to maintain control over their narrative. The Zodiac Killer's influence extended beyond law enforcement, leaving an indelible mark on popular culture. Countless books, documentaries, and films have been made about his crimes, with the most notable being the 2007 film Zodiac, directed by David Fincher. The film, based on the true events of the case, captured the obsession and frustration that came with the investigation, as well as the fear and anxiety that the Zodiac instilled in the public. It was a chilling portrayal of how a killer could evade justice for so long, all while taunting those trying to bring him to justice. But beyond the Hollywood allure, there remains a lingering truth. The Zodiac Killer's true identity might still be hidden in plain sight. With each new theory and piece of evidence that surfaces, the case continues to captivate the world's attention. Some believe that the killer is long dead, while others hold out hope that the truth will eventually come to light. Either way, the case of the Zodiac Killer remains one of the most enduring and mysterious criminal investigations in history. In the end, the Zodiac was more than just a murderer. He was a symbol of fear, a figure who preyed on the public's fascination with the unknown. He remains an enigma to this day, and the hunt for the truth continues. If you found this case intriguing, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the world's most mysterious cases.